When it comes to prepping for the MCAT, it can seem daunting at first. But really, starting is the hardest part. We at the UNR Med Learning and Wellness Resource Center hope that in this online lecture series we can prep you for everything that you need to know for the MCAT. To start off, let's have a brief look at the test overview. The test currently, as it stands, is broken down into 4 sections with breaks in between, and the table listed here will show you the breakdown. So the first section is Chemical and Physical Foundations of Biological Systems. It's a 59 question, 1 hour, 35-minute portion. This portion will cover physics, general chemistry, some biology, and biochemistry. That's why this is commonly nicknamed the physical sciences section. After this section, it'll be followed by a 10-minute break, which is optional. Now mind you, every break during this test is optional, but we strongly recommend that you take it. After the first break, it will be followed by a section called Critical Analysis and Reasoning Skills, or CARS, as it will be commonly called throughout this course. This section involves a lot of passage-based reading, and it tests your verbal reasoning aptitude. After the CARS section, there will be a mid-exam lunch break that will be half an hour. We strongly recommend you bring something to eat and recharge before finishing the second half of the test. The third section is the Biological and Biochemical Foundations of Living Systems. This is again 59 questions and a 1 hour and 35-minute duration. This section will cover biology, biochemistry, and organic chemistry. Afterwards, there will be another optional 10-minute break. The last section is a relative newcomer to the MCAT. It is the Psychological, Social, and Biological Foundations of Behavior. We will commonly call this one the Behavioral Sciences section. And again, this is 59 questions at an hour and 35 minutes. The total content time is going to run to be about 6 hours and 15 minutes. And the total time of your test will be about 7 hours and 30 minutes. But again, this depends on if you take your breaks and how quickly you finish your test. Subjects covered. So for starters, the subjects covered seems like a very lengthy list at first, but keep in mind that for the MCAT, you will not be asked to have a mastery of these subjects to any extent similar to what you have taken in your undergraduate. Biochemistry, physics, general chemistry, organic chemistry, psychology, sociology, and verbal reasoning are going to be subjects that are covered. And again, these are all areas that we will be covering in this lecture series. Let's go ahead and go over each section and what it's going to look like. For starters, the physical sciences, biological sciences, and behavioral sciences portions, that's section 1, 3, and 4, all consist of 59 questions. There will be 10 passages and 44 passage-based questions. In addition to this, there will be 15 discrete questions without passages linked to them, interspersed throughout the exam. The CARS section is slightly different. It entails 1 less passage and about 6 less questions. Again, this is all based on verbal reasoning, so there are no discrete questions in this portion. When you break it down, you basically have 8 minutes per passage, and it boils down to about 1 minute per question total. So make sure you're aware of that when you're practicing for this test so that you're mindful of your time so you have enough to finish the whole section. Now, this is the part that everybody is interested in, and that's their scoring. So the MCAT is based on 5 results, 1 for each section, along with a total aggregate score. Each section score ranges from 118 to 132, with 125 as the midpoint. The total score ranges from 472 to 528, with 500 at the midpoint. The score report also provides confidence intervals for each section. Treat these as error margins, so it'll give you roughly a range where you fell in. Mind you, the scores are equated, so each MCAT 2015 test is scored independently. So each test date is weighted as its own independent entity. So you won't be weighed against people who have taken the test before or after you. It'll only be for that given test date. Here's a breakdown that's provided by the AAMC regarding the tests. So as you can see, 125 for each section is about average. It's in the middle. And 500, which is the score listed right here, is sort of the middle of the bell curve. Now, anything above a 500 is great, but be aware that every university, every med program is going to have a slightly different weight when it comes to how they evaluate MCAT scores. So if you are interested in what sort of MCAT score you need to be shooting for, just go online and look up the resources. Every school has an average MCAT for their admitted class. So now that we know how the test looks, let's go ahead and go into how to study for it. So we've prepared a list of tips for studying and prepping for your big day. First and foremost, you need to have a regular regimen of studying. This will make sure that everything is consistent and that you are practicing on a daily basis. If you study sporadically, it will be very difficult to retain the information when you need it. Try not to just read your information. Really engage yourself. That includes flashcards, making games, writing shorthand notes, or just drawing pictures, but anything other than just sitting there and reading. There's a lot of studies to show that people who are actively engaged in their education tend to memorize things and learn and retain better than people who just sit there. Focus more on your weaknesses than your strengths. Now, we all have an area that we struggle with. So make sure that that is the area you focus on the most. Make sure that you cover your strengths as well. But mind you, you already are very proficient in this area, so don't devote too much time or energy to this. Practice your timing. The MCAT is a timed test. Everyone has only a certain amount of time to finish. So you need to make sure that you are on point with your timing. Otherwise, you're going to have to rush to finish. I cannot stress this enough. You must practice. A lot of the MCAT is based around exposure. That means knowing how questions are written, knowing what kind of answers they're looking for, and knowing which approaches to take for each given question type. The only way to get that exposure is to practice taking tests. Which brings us to our next point. There are several practice exams available, and which ones you use is up to you. There's the Gold Standard, Kaplan, and there's stuff on the AAMC as well. Make sure you take as many as you can. Repetition is key. Practice does make perfect. Really try to have fun with it. It's not the most exciting thing you could do, but it's very important for your future. It's better to try to enjoy it than to treat it as a chore. And again, it is possible to overdo it. Really try to not burn yourself out. So, we've gone into a little bit of how to study for it, but how about taking the test itself? There's a lot of tips and tricks when it comes to taking the test that might help you moving forward. First and foremost, each of the sections are based around mostly passage-based questions. It is really important that you understand the passage before going into the questions. So, when you read the passage, it's very important that you have a brief outline for each passage. You don't want this to be a novel or a summary. You want it to really be an outline, just a way for you to navigate the passage quickly when it comes time to answer the questions. Whenever you look at the answer choices, be very careful when you see choices that have extremes. That includes always, never, or not. When you see words that illustrate an extreme of one way or another, you want to use caution. Be sure that it is correct. If you are unsure, then you might want to consider holding off. Eliminate choices. Generally, it's better to get it down to as few possible choices as you can. Currently, with 4 choices for each question, you are at a 25%. If you can eliminate 2 of the choices, it already goes down to a 50-50. That's a coin flip. Do what's best for you, but it's often best to try to eliminate choices that you know are absolutely not true. Be mindful of the wording. The MCAT will try to confuse you by mixing in wordings or using wordings that are very convoluted, something that you wouldn't hear in normal day-to-day speech. Read carefully and make sure that you fully understand what the sentence you're reading is trying to say. Time management is key for the test. In the slide prior, we talked about some general guidelines for how much time you should be taking for each passage and each question. So just be careful, and again, you will have a timer, so you will be able to see that. Skip the questions when it's appropriate. So if you are unsure of a question or know that it's going to take more than about a minute to solve, you may want to consider skipping it. Write the notes that you need to before moving on, but don't invest time in earlier questions at the expense of later questions. Do not leave answers blank. This is not like the SAT, where you get penalized for wrong answers. You are doing yourself a disservice by leaving answers blank. Again, at worst, you have a 1 in 4 chance of getting the correct answer by just guessing. So, you've done all of your prep, and you're ready to go and feeling great. But what does test day look like? Well, for starters, the day before your test, you should take it easy. Don't study, don't cram, don't freak yourself out. Just take it easy, enjoy your day, and try to relax. It also might be a good idea to go to the test center and make sure that you know where it is and what the layout of the center looks like. That way, on the test day, you're not caught off guard or by surprise. The last thing we'd want is to get lost on test day and show up to our exam late. During the test, you will be searched and you will be examined. This is to ensure that you're not bringing external materials into the testing center. So it's in your best interest to wear comfortable clothes that don't require too much searching. This way, you will have more time to worry about your test and less time getting checked for miscellaneous. Bring some food and water. So you do have breaks. Although you will not be allowed to bring any outside materials into your test, you will be allowed to eat and drink during your breaks. So it's in your best interest to do that. If you're hungry during your test, it's going to be very hard to concentrate. Also, bring a light lunch for that 30-minute interval. Don't bring anything too heavy or anything that requires heating or cooking. It's not a guarantee that the test center is going to have areas for you to cook or heat things up. Make sure you bring a valid photo ID. This could be a driver's license or a passport. Student IDs or any other sort of identification card is not going to cut it, so make sure you bring something that will work. And it is a good idea to bring your registration sheet as well, just in case there's an issue. Do not wear any jewelry. This includes necklaces, bracelets, or rings. You don't want anything that could possibly incriminate you. Lastly, with electronic devices, you really want to not bring them if you can. Anything that's electronic that goes off during your test is going to potentially get your test disqualified. So if you can, make sure you don't bring those things, or at least turn them off. We mentioned this earlier, but you will not be allowed to bring anything inside to the testing area. So pencils and scratch paper will be provided for you. If you have a lucky pencil or a lucky eraser, you're going to have to learn to do without, because nothing's going into that center except for you. Show up early. The check-in process does take some time, so you want to make sure that you are early so that you can start the test sooner. Generally, 15 to 20 minutes before the actual time is ideal. That way they can get you tested in, checked, and ready to go. Avoid any behavior that may be deemed suspicious. Keep in mind that this is a very serious situation. Anything that could be possibly viewed as suspicious, such as talking to others, looking in strange directions, or behavior in general that seems slightly off, might get your results disqualified. So really just be on your best behavior and try not to do anything suspicious. Lastly, don't panic. Relax. If you're there on your test day, you're ready. Be confident and know that you've studied and put in the effort to get a good score. So that'll do it for basic MCAT fundamentals and structure. In the upcoming videos, we will start to go into the content that you can expect to see on test day. Happy studying!